So uh, if we could go to the next slide, Todd. And this is just our contact information. We'll have this at the end of the presentation as well. Just to give a quick introduction, and then I'll turn things over to Jan for a moment. I'm Tom Clareson. I work with Performing Arts Readiness at LYRISIS, which is a library, archives, and museum network. I spent about 30 years in that world before moving over to the arts community about 5-6 years ago for this project. I am based in central Ohio, in the traditional lands of the Delaware and Wyandot tribes and many other tribes as well. I've worked in disaster preparedness, preservation, and archiving, and you'll hear about all of those types of activities as we talk about PAR. And Jan?
Thanks, Tom. I'm also glad to be here with you. I'm calling in from Corning, New York, and that is the unceded land of the Haudenosaunee, which we knew growing up as the Iroquois Nation. So quite a few tribes here in upstate New York, and I always say that we're at the bottom of the middle finger of the Finger Lakes. Corning is. It's kind of looking like Corning today with the underbelly of the elephant here in upstate. Not a lot of sun. I work both with Tom on the Performing Arts Readiness Project and as the director of NCAPER, and both of those programs are organizations are funded by the Mellon Foundation, and we've been working together since 2017, I guess. 17.
Yeah.
And it's been interesting. I come from a background of, I've run 8 arts organizations, arts councils, the Rochester Philharmonic, Charleston Symphony, and I've taught in not only modern dance, but also in arts management, and also was director of grants at the South Carolina Arts Commission. So I come from on-the-job training, how to handle crises and disasters, and it's been very interesting to learn what I should have been doing all along as a leader, and so it's been an interesting journey, and hopefully our information will be really just the start of where you can go for help in this sort of thing, and what we have to offer. So, and hopefully we'll all have time to ask questions at the end. So Tom, I turn it back to you. Next slide.
Great. And thank you, Todd. I wanted to explain when I was talking about this whole number of organizations that are working together, I wanted to explain a little bit about how that came about. Really, after Hurricane Katrina, there was a look in the arts and humanities, libraries, archives, museum world about trying to have more resilient organizations and networking so that we could meet the challenges when disaster happens, if possible. So I think that there was a resurgence after Hurricane Katrina in emergency management thinking. And one of the great things was that a number of funders started to turn their attention to working with the arts community to help both prepare for and recover from disasters. And so all the organizations that are up here have actually benefited from some level of funding from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, as well as some other organizations as well. At the bottom, Performing Arts Readiness, I'll talk with you a little bit more about the training that we offer, free training that's available. information resources, and we have a number of grant programs that are available. Jan's area, and you'll see a whole lot of projects that have been developed over the past year, especially, but does advocacy for arts organizations and disaster preparedness, as well as networking, particularly after a disaster happens. And in fact, Jan and I are going to be on a call at 3 o'clock, a continuing series of calls that we're doing with arts organizations in Western Kentucky who were hit by actually 2 tornadoes during December and have been also continually hit by these ice and snowstorms too. So whether it is Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands after Maria and Irma, or whether it is Kentucky after some of the disasters that happened there in late 2021, that networking is an important part of what NCAPER works on. And then Arts Ready, we'll talk a bit about that. That is a service that has been available through South Arts for a number of years, but it is something that now a couple of organizations are working together on, and it's an automated disaster planning tool. And we are about to unveil, hopefully during March, we're in beta test right now, Arts Ready 2.0, which is a expanded version of the Arts Ready tool. And then finally, you can see sort of flying out of the middle of all the gears is Surf Plus, the Craft Emergency Relief Fund, otherwise known as the Artist Safety Net. They are based in Vermont and New Hampshire and work with the visual arts and crafts artists as well. So they do a lot of work with individual artists. And again, these are all groups who have had some level of funding from the Mellon Foundation, and Mellon has asked us to work together, and now it's just turning into a normal thing for us. So that has been great. On the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about what PAR is doing and how we can do what we do. We began in 2017, and we bring together sort of preservation, conservation specialty groups, as well as leading arts services organizations. So you'll see our parent organization, Lyrasis, in the upper left-hand corner. You'll see a couple of conservation centers in Philadelphia, CCAHA, the Conservation Center for Art and Historic Artifacts. In Minneapolis in the upper Midwest, the Midwest Art Conservation Center. ICA, the Intermuseum Conservation Association, is based in Cleveland and does work really in the Midwest and the Northeast as well. And then I know many of you, because of your location, are probably familiar with NEDCC, the Northeast Document Conservation Center. And that's been a group that I've partnered with for a good part of my 30 years. And the one thing that I would say is, if you're not familiar with NEDCC, which is based in at the Andover area in Massachusetts, I would say they are great to become familiar with. They have a set of technical leaflets on preservation, archiving, disaster preparedness that are great. None of them, I think, is over 4 pages long. They're easy to digest, have a lot of great resources, and they're really popular. They're the industry standard. I have talked to staff there, and they say that it's a bad year when they get 3 million hits on their website. It's a good year when they usually get sort of 5 million hits, because people from all over the world, from South Africa to Europe, are working with the technical leaflets that they have. So we've got those folks who have been working together for 35, 40 years on some levels of nonprofit organization disaster response. And then we've really focused on working with the arts leaders at South Arts, at Arts Ready. The New Jersey State Council on the Arts was an early group to come in and give a perspective there, but now we're also working very closely with California, with Maryland. We're glad to work with you and get the state perspective. National Performance Network, which is based in New Orleans, and works with various underserved arts groups and small arts groups throughout the country. One of our partners who we've worked with throughout our project is the International Association of Blacks in Dance, which is based in the DMV, the District, Maryland, and Virginia area. And then we also have NCAPER and the Western Arts Alliance on the West Coast. So on the next slide, I'm going to talk for a moment about the kind of things that we do. We have services to reach both producing and presenting organizations. And I think the most important thing here is organizations with and without facilities. So, if you have a building, there are certain things you need to prepare for with the building, with the facility. But if you're coming into a building, there are a lot of things you might be unprepared for. And in some cases, you might not have a whole lot of help from the building owners. The whole reason that we started working with organizations that are companies that tour is that they have talked with us and said, we go into 6 buildings a year, and in only one of them do they have a disaster plan. In the other places, we don't know where the fire poles are. We don't know who exactly we should be calling. So trying to have these companies that are coming in and using other facilities is really important. We do a lot of work in outreach and community engagement with a wide variety of local arts agency and state arts agency presentations. We too have a lot of information resources. We've got a series of case studies ranging from everything, including how in Hurricane Harvey, how the Alley Theater recovered very quickly from that because of their pre-planning that they had done, to articles on a variety of topics, including power outages, sort of pivoting in programs, a number of different areas. This funny block that says the Circuit Rider Project. You might think, now what is going on here with that? Well, is somebody riding around on a horse between different places? What we actually do with this is we have half-time staff that we hire part-time to, in 10 areas throughout the country during the duration of our project so far, work on building local networks and helping organizations through consulting, through localized education, and unfortunately, with a couple of them, when there have been roof collapses at theaters or other things, our circuit riders have come in and helped those organizations recover. The templates and tools, I think that was Jan's and not mine, but mine are going to start any moment now.
Sorry.
With the templates and tools, we have a couple of things that are of interest. Prior to getting the Arts Ready tool rolled out, we had something called the Pocket Response Resource, which a 2-sided sheet that actually can be folded up and go in your wallet, your purse, etc. And it has the key things to look at saving and the key organizations that you would look at calling, and it's something that you can fill out very quickly to do that. So that's a sort of very light version of the plan, and then we're going to move into, as we mentioned, the Arts Ready plan. The other thing that I want to mention, because it's been popular ever since we started it in 2017, is the project. We have something that I call the board scaring tool, and it's actually something where you can take a look at it's a method to do risk assessment or a risk calculator, and it looks at your number of seats, the price of the seats, and what would happen if you had a disaster that closed your organization for 2 performances all the way to 20 performances, and it helps you calculate what some of the costs would be. And so it oftentimes is used by people who want to put together disaster plans by talking to their board and saying, this is something that's important. The most important thing that we have on here, in my point of view from PAR, is our training. We have a series of about 21 webinars that we make available as live online webinars with speakers from the organizations around the country. But the other thing is that all of these are available in a recorded version as well, because we know people can't always get to their computers at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And so we've got recordings there too. We've got disaster network and disaster planning grants. Unfortunately for this round, those have been given out, but we have actually been able to give disaster planning grants to almost 80 organizations to develop disaster plans with national consultants and to actually get some disaster supplies. And these networks, currently we have 8 networks going. We did 7 in our first grant, so 15 really arts-focused, arts-specific networks that take a look at helping people develop their plans. And the last 2 things here are special focus activities that we've been doing in this grant. One of them is on festival safety. It's a project called The Art of Mass Gatherings. And for a little while, we were calling it the art of no gatherings and talking about virtualization while we couldn't have festivals. Then we were calling it the art of masked gatherings because of that situation. But we also have looked at in North Carolina, in Northern Virginia, and now in areas like Memphis, Puerto Rico, California, and a number of other areas. We're looking at issues of accessibility, sustainability, actual fire and personal safety, and community engagement for festivals. And then the last thing that we've talked about is arts administration programs. Jan and I talked to about 12 organizations each year, 12 schools each year, about thinking about all these issues, because it's not something that's in the arts administration curriculum most of the time. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Jan for the next slide.
Thanks, Tom. I'll go quickly so that we have enough time for questions, but this is really the NCAPER was formed in 2006 following Hurricanes Katrina and Rita, when it became very clear that there were incredible gaps of disaster assistance for the arts sector. And that really is still very true today in many ways, in that FEMA defines cultural resources as buildings and parks, not to include artists and arts organizations. So I'm very proud of the advocacy work that NCAPER has done. They're rewriting some of the regulations to define cultural resources to include artists, arts organizations, and cultural organizations. But that's how we all started, and seeing the names of these organizations around the circle are organizations that are charter members of NCAPER and still continue to work with us. Actors Fund, MusiCares. MusiCares is the nonprofit arm of the Grammys, and they help any kind of performing artists, or even a groupie. I mean, you don't have to be on stage to get the help that they have available. And of course, the Actors Fund has been going on for hundreds of years, I think, over 100. And they have many, many programs and services, including mental health services for performers, and that means both on and off stage. So all these organizations, we work together, and the idea is for preparedness to be accepted as a business standard. We're trying to create that safety net for all of the arts sector, not just those with buildings and very old buildings. So we do a lot of different things, including on the next slide. I'm proud of this and the fact that we have special pages on our website that will, for those of us who don't ever want to read the long 80 page version, you always want the abridged section. It gives you an idea of what's here, and you can go section to section we got funding from the National Endowment as well as the Mellon Foundation to do this. And I'm proud to say that as of today, the Spanish version of this is also downloadable as a PDF. And the whole idea for this was to have a user-friendly, language-friendly guide to what is just available, what is available, what do you have to do? And having been through a community crisis of my own way back, I understand, when you're in the boiling water stage, you don't comprehend bureaucratic talk. And so I think we did a great job. We had some really good input from FEMA people, from SBA people, and it's worth, if you have disasters in your area, and I think we all do at this point, to be familiar that this is a resource that anybody can download. You can also order printed copies, which I've tried to encourage state arts councils and regional arts organizations to do, because when you lose Wi-Fi, having a downloadable file is not important, but you still need the information. And then the next slide is about our CAM network pilot program. And Molly is one of our famous 12, which is the pilot program of arts responders. And what we made it is a mandatory thing that you had to be working in either a local arts agency or state or regional, so that this wouldn't go away when the actual pilot program stopped. And the idea is crisis analysis and mitigation. We talk about arts responders. Well, we're not first responders. However, when things die down and people are getting their breath back, it's the arts and the artists that bring people back to a healing situation. And what we did was worked with AIR Institute to train these people to be able to go into communities and help people hear everyone's voice in the community, not just the so-called leaders, but people of that represent the entire community, and to figure out what could you do to help make sure it doesn't happen again, whatever it is, and which is the whole idea of mitigation. But we're hoping to get another round two of these coaches, and we're hoping, as you see, they represent all 6 of the um, regional arts organizations. We hope to get one in every state and territory. So that's my goal anyway. And then the next slide is something that came out of the 2 years of pandemic, is that we realized that obviously organizations are in flux. And so we've called this the Organizations at a Crossroad. And it's a toolkit. And we hired Molly Quinlan Hayes, who had 14 years experience running Arts Ready for South Arts. And she interviewed a lot of people. She researched a lot of things and really developed kind of a guideline or tools for organizations who were thinking, what are we going to do? Do we have to close shop? How are we going to keep going? Can we merge? What are the legal ramifications? What are the personnel? What does the board do? All these things? And this is all on the NCAPER website. And there are 3 different sections, and you can, they're linked, but they don't have to be sequential or anything. You can go to, I think one of the best ones is the transferring of information and having staff people really work with each other. I don't know if you know from running, when you have a job description, it never tells us what you really do. It's just a very vague idea. And so the idea of working with another staff person to really share, what do you do daily? What do you do weekly? Who do you interact with? And how has this happened? It gives your organization a much stronger position should someone leave or get ill or just, leave the job completely. You're not completely left high and dry. And there's a whole list of questions there that I find to be really helpful, and I would use actually for any uh, outgoing interview, exit interview. I would make sure I had that information before anybody left, but that's just me. And so now I'm going to turn it back to Tom. We're going to talk a little bit about readiness. And I got
Great.
the sun
And
on my eyes.
and this is one of those slides that sort of builds, Todd. So if you want to hit the button again, we can have two sort of definitional things at this point. The idea of what is readiness, both performing arts readiness and readiness in general for disasters. And it's in that idea of being in a posture to be resilient and prepared for whatever crisis, emergency, or disaster might arise. And Jan always talks about this as being a dancer in the posture to begin rehearsal or begin a performance, and get ready to spring into action. And I think the biggest thing out of this first bullet here is whatever crisis, emergency, or disaster may arise. And what we try to talk about is this idea of an all hazards approach. And that is, certainly it can be hurricanes, tornadoes, snowstorms, etc. But what about the resulting sort of man-made problems of power outages? What about if there is a hostile intruder in your building or active shooter situation? Being prepared for those areas, and then being prepared for the kind of thing that we have seen in the past 2 years with the pandemic, the economic fluctuations, and certainly all of the social justice and racial justice issues we've been thinking about. So we want to be prepared for dealing with those crises. How can we do that as an arts organization? And one of the things is to have a plan. A combination definitely of documents, that sort of written plan that you can fall back to on how you can continue your operations. Processes, again, that continuity of operations thing comes in. If you do have a flood, would you go to an alternative facility in order to present your programs? And then training as well. And Randy asked, does this include financial crises? For sure. Two things about that, Randy, to just jump in. We definitely talk about that in the organizations at a Crossroads booklet. That's actually a big part of what we do in order to work with your board, work with your community on those financial types of crises that you might see. With the readiness plan, it's a combination of all those things and training, making sure you practice this and train it, talking about what levels of leadership, staff, and constituencies might work with you if disasters occur. And Jan has said in the past, it's an organizational muscle that you train and strengthen over time, and it's never done. It's something that you really try to keep on flexing that readiness muscle as you go along. So on the next slide, one of the things that we've been doing, and as we sort of build this slide out, is looking at your reopening readiness. So we have people, the kinds of emergency plans you have for staff, volunteers, residents. Jan just talked with the Association of Residents Artists yesterday, artist communities, and audience members. And so did your staff have, and is it something that you built with shutdown protocols? And if you needed to do that, how was that? How did that go? Could you do it again more easily? Did your staff have the capability and capacity to work from home? The idea of, was everyone affiliated with your organization treated with respect and care? And very importantly, Another question or thing to think about, did your payroll continue? Were there any hiccups or speed bumps with that? In communication, did you prepare stakeholder messaging to participants, donors, the media, and the general public? That outward and external communication is really important. But I got to tell you, what Jan and I heard during our presentations in the very midst of all the things that were going on with the pandemic was that the communication within organizations was not really good either. People knowing about what was going to happen with reopening, the move to virtual, et cetera. We talked to a lot of young professionals, new professionals, rising professionals who said, we feel like that communication aspect of things could have been better. And then programming, the last area here, was your organization nimble and quick in producing virtual events and performances? And when you were doing these different types of changes in your programming, were you able to continue to focus on your mission as you went along? On the next slide, just a couple of critical areas to think about and talk about. How can you best work with your staff and performers or visual artists? Here, one of the things that we've been really excited by is there's a group in the Nashville area called Whippoorwill Arts, and Whippoorwill Arts wrote up sort of a manual for companies or performers that were going between different performance areas and presenting areas, and what they needed to look out for their health and safety. So that was good. How did you deal with your rehearsal and performance spaces? We talked to a number of groups based everywhere from New York to San Francisco, and they were talking about getting locked out of their performance spaces or their rehearsal spaces because they were part of another building. How did they deal with that? And could they find an alternative place to perform? And that's one of the things that there's a great model in Houston. The model in Houston is people call the president of the University of Houston and she can always seem to find a performance spot for them. But not every city has that. So, what can we do there? For program delivery, are there new ways to add to and to do program delivery? And getting to what Randy said specifically, finances. What steps should be done to minimize concern with your finances? You may not be having a lot of revenue, but in some cases you might not have had a lot of expenses either. So thinking about that balance is important. How can technology help you? Both new and old technology is important. And then staff making reopening and restarting plans. We'll talk about that for just a bit in our next slide. The most important thing here is that last little block, maintaining your brand, your momentum, and your community. And this is something that Jan and I try to emphasize as much as we can, keeping, even if you're closed or not running a whole lot of parts of the presentations, what is the idea of how can you continue to communicate with your community? And on the next slide, Jan, I realized that yesterday I sort of talked all over this slide. I don't know if you or I are supposed to do it, but either way is fine.
It's yours, Tom.
Okay, good. We've been volleyballing these back and forth in the past couple of presentations. So as we start to look at reopening issues and plans, here are some areas that you can concentrate on. For those of you that have buildings, what are the capacity and safety issues that you need to think about? The seating issues. Can you move some of your performances outside? Now, I realize I'm saying that on the day of a snowstorm, but are you planning to do that in the spring? Developing policies for patron and staff safety, limited seating, different types of ventilation, and new entry and exit plans. And this is something a lot of people said, new plans, we didn't have very good ingress and egress plans in the first place. So people have really had an opportunity to take a look at this and make some improvements, not just for the time of the pandemic, but in the future as well. Developing modified performances, virtualized performances, everything from McNichols Center in Denver to Dance Theater of Harlem, and what they have done with virtual performances has been excellent. And I can't emphasize enough working with local health departments and first responders. We've always suggested working with police, fire, and emergency operations managers, but I never used to before have the public health department on my Rolodex to call. And we've seen places like the Duluth Playhouse in northern Minnesota. They were able to do this, and they could run camps actually in the summer of 2020 and performances in the late fall of 2020 because they worked with their health department and health officials to make sure that the situation was safe. So with that, we can move over to talk about some tools that you can think about.
Well, Tom already mentioned this quite a bit, but this is what it looks like. D-Plan Arts Ready 2.0, and drum roll, it's about to come out. We've been saying this for 4 years now. uh, but what it is, for those of you who are D-Plan users, they're mainly libraries and museums. And in order to get accreditation from the AMA, is it?
Yeah, American Alliance of
Yeah.
Museums and others. Yeah.
You have to have a D plan, but you put the information in and it spits out in 104 pages. It was clunky, to say the least. And Arts Ready 2.0 had not really ever gotten to an online version, but they have all these ideas, what should go in a readiness plan. So we got all together and decided it could be done as one. And it's taken a while, but no matter which side of the coin you come in through, you will end up with your own tool or your own plan. And it doesn't matter what your organization size is or scope or discipline. It asks you the questions and you provide the answers in it. It prioritizes what you need to work on first, where are things missing, and anybody can do this. And I just want to say that we have about 1,000, maybe 909 uh, 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 waivers for the whole thing. Will cost you only $49.40 or $59.40 a year, and we encourage you to subscribe every year because you need to update things, etc. But for performing arts organizations of really any size at this point, can apply to have a waiver for the first year. And I encourage you to do that. And it will be a process that will go through NCAPER. Somehow we're going to, the form will be, it comes back to us, and then you get a code or something, and you can register with the NEDCC, which is they're doing, thank God, the entire technical side of this. I don't know what I would do but this is really what you need to do. Any organization needs to do this. So I encourage you, and it will be coming out soon. So stay awake for that one. And in the next slide, he talked about the pocket response resource, and it is 2 pages, and it's it's a nice thing. You can print it out on regular printer, double-sided, and there's actually little fold things so you can fold it down so it fits in your wallet or in your purse or whatever, or your pocket. And it contains things like the phone tree. Who are your insurance people? Who do you call when it's flood? What is the fire department number? Things like that are very pertinent to your organization, and that's a really good way to start, actually, before you sign up for the Arts Ready or D Plan. And I can't tell you if you can create a culture of preparedness within your organization, you're going to be so much further on than most organizations. And we have found in these last 2 years, those organizations that had plans, they were already working on how we creatively deal with this because everything else was in place. They knew what the critical stuff was. They knew who had, who was a spokesperson. Da, da, da. All these decisions had been made. Not to say that it doesn't change because you upgrade all the time, but um, they were ahead of things, and I can't encourage you enough to be one of them, actually. So I'm going to turn it to Tom, and we're going to be asking you for answers and questions.
Yeah, we have some questions that we sort of populated things with, and I always laugh at this because I always get to tell a tale on myself. In 2021, we were trying to think about what was our set of presentations for the various regional arts groups going to look like. And Jan said, how about if we take a look at the bright side, talk about new opportunities that materialized during the pandemic, relief resources, collaboration and communication. And I said, oh, that's going to go over like a lead balloon. We're going to have people who, listen to that and then they say, oh, I'm out of here. But it turned out we had the biggest number of people attending the presentations, the best stories. The only thing that turned out badly was the tech people from all these associations got really mad at us because they were trying to end the sessions and people wanted to continue talking. So we would go over every single time. So it
Listen
was
to
great.
Jan.
That's right. We were like, thanks to Jan, we got that going. So I guess what we could do first is maybe think about what questions you have for us related to anything that we've presented here, and then also move on to talk about anything that you saw as far as new opportunities are concerned. So any general questions that you might have that we could answer.
Can we go back to seeing everybody?